The second week of intense rains had begun. By this point, my backyard was partially submerged, the wet ground sinking beneath my boots, kicking up muddy water with every step. The water creeping across the yard seemed to have a will of its own, lazily pulling into larger puddles as my boots sank with a soft, muffled squelch. The air was thick with a strong scent of wet earth, soaked vegetation, and something else. Something metallic, cold, mingling with the sharp wind that followed each gust. That's when the first one came. I felt the hairs on my arms stand as static gathered in the air. Then the crash, a lightning bolt striking just in front of me. The flash was so bright that for a second everything around me vanished. The yard, the trees, the sky. Only that blinding white light remained. Then came the thunder, a deep sound not from above, but from all directions at once. It felt like the world around me was screaming, suffocated by the weight of the storm. I was trembling as the world returned, my feet rooted to the ground, while the rest of my body convulsed in shock. My ears were still ringing, and I couldn't even hear the incessant rain hitting the ground. I decided to run back to the house and cancel my plans for the morning. As I ran, the weight of the rain-soaked clothes dragged me down, each step harder than the last. The rain, thick and heavy, pelted my face until I finally reached the door and stumbled inside. I slammed the door behind me, leaning my back against the cold wood, gasping for breath. My chest heaved, and the sense of safety the house provided was fleeting, almost illusory. Outside, the thunder roared again, deeper this time, vibrating as if the very air was being torn apart. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to calm my nerves. Just a storm, I thought, just a storm. But something wasn't right. It wasn't just the violence of the lightning or the crash of the thunder. There was something in the air, a presence almost tangible. That strange smell lingered stronger now, as if the lightning had burned something invisible around me. I crossed the room, my heavy boots soaking the floor, and hesitantly approached the window. Outside, the rain fell like silver curtains, and the sky seemed lower, almost touching the trees. The clouds were so thick that they formed a dense, dark wall, a storm front. And then I saw them, standing in the clouds, between the cracks illuminated by the lightning, figures sculpted from the darkness itself. Their silhouettes barely moved, but their outlines were perfectly visible with each new flash of light, as if the sky was slowly revealing a secret that was never meant to be exposed. My eyes locked onto them, unable to look away. Tall, thin, with strangely human forms, but something distorted, something wrong. Their heads were elongated, almost oval, and their faces were featureless, smooth as polished marble. They had no eyes, but I could feel their gaze, heavy, cold, fixed on the earth. The storm seemed to intensify, the thunder now echoing in a near-military cadence. The lightning illuminated them for just a brief moment, but in that moment I saw more detail. Their long, thin hands, with fingers extending into almost imperceptible claws, reaching down as if trying to touch what lay below. The sound of thunder had changed. It was no longer a solitary crash. Now it was a continuous echo, a constant vibration in the air. Like a deep, ancient sigh, each roll of thunder carried a pulse that reverberated inside me, as if the bones in my body were attuned to feel it. And then I realized the sound wasn't coming from the sky, but from them. They were speaking, but their voices were so immense, so far removed from any language we could understand, that all we could hear was noise like static. These figures were communicating, talking amongst themselves, or perhaps with something below. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to make sense of what my eyes were seeing, but all rationality seemed to slip away. They were growing, their elongated forms, once only visible against the clouds, now stretched beyond the sky itself, as if the clouds were their shoes, or the extension of their limbs. Their shapes began distorting the horizon, like reflections warped in a pool of water. It struck me then. They weren't really bodies, but shadows of something far larger, something that existed in another dimension. Another thunderclap, and this time the sound came with a new detail. Their faces, once smooth and blank, were now cracking small fissures where thin beams of light escaped. A blue ethereal light like the glow of distant stars. These cracks pulsed synchronized with the thunder, and as I watched, the light seemed to be trying to expand, as if something inside them was struggling to break free. My hands shook. I felt the air in the room change, thicker, colder, as if the house itself was being swallowed by the presence of these creatures. This was no longer just a storm. Something greater was happening, something so ancient and primordial that my mind couldn't even begin to comprehend it. All I knew was that with each passing second, those figures grew larger, and with them, the sound, the noise, that was now less like thunder and more like a deep, mournful wail. And in that moment, the truth dawned on me. They weren't growing, they were getting closer. Each lightning strike, each thunderclap, wasn't nature's blind fury, wasn't the simple roar of a storm. No, it was the echo of their steps. Those beings, those colossal shadows, were walking through the veil of reality, and each crash that shook the earth was nothing less than the impact of their feet on the fabric of the world. The sound that terrified me was the sound of marching, a slow, deliberate march. They were coming toward me. What once felt like a distant cold light now surrounded me. I felt the air vibrate, the terrible rhythm of an incomprehensible force. My knees buckled, and I collapsed to the floor, too weak to react. Everything made sense at once. They were coming. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. I felt the pressure in the air intensify, as if the world itself was being compressed. My ears rang with a piercing noise, as if I was submerged underwater, sinking deeper and deeper into its depths. Breathing became difficult. They were almost here. The final thunderclap, the largest of them all, shook the entire house. I screamed, a sound swallowed by the chaos around me. The world collapsed around me as those shadows moved with an implacable slowness. Their footsteps echoed in my mind, beating like an ancient war drum, and the last thing I saw before I blacked out was their silhouettes engulfing the sky. When I woke, the silence was absolute. The sun was shining, the sky was clear, and the air smelled fresh, as it always does after a heavy rain. But there was no relief in my chest. I knew too well that the bright blue was a lie, a turquoise veil hiding the horror I had witnessed. It was only a pause, a brief calm. I know they'll come back. The next storm will bring their steps again. And next time, they'll arrive, lightning by lightning, thunder by thunder.